Do you like my top?
I love your top. Kiki bought you that.
It's the year of 77.
Fabulous for you Star Wars fans.
Anyway.
And don't believe what the people say. The new Star Wars film is blooming brilliant, and I don't even like Star Wars.
Yeah.
So, we are not here to talk about Star Wars. We are here to talk about the third and final episode of the English Scandal.
Very English
scandal. Oh my God. We loved it.
Oh, right. I wondered what was happening there. I thought people were going to start entering the room.
Loved episode 1. We were a bit about episode 2. Episode 3, fabulous form. Oh my God, I could watch it again tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I think episode 3 was that much better because we just had so much more Hugh Grant in it.
Yeah.
But also, by the end of this episode, Ben Whishaw had really grown on me. Or he grew on me throughout this episode.
Yeah.
I thought he...
really came into his own. I thought he was brilliant.
And I felt that he was a really strong advocate in his performance of the frustrations of a number of gay men who sit on the fringes of mainstream society, used for sort of sexual proclivities and then dismissed and sort of hidden in the shadows. And I thought his speech in the dock was incredibly powerful.
In fact, the whole court case, again, like the whole of the series, was like, did this really happen? Did this really happen? And it did. It all did really happen.
And I was so surprised that, a couple of great actors came into the film and into the series. Whoever the actor was who played Jeremy Thorpe's lawyer, I thought he was very good. The fact that we first found him in prison. Did we find him in a prison cell?
I mean, did that really happen? Yes.
And then his wonderful line in the halls of power where he says, we've had so many, absolute sort of perverts, outrages, criminal cases, and yours is by far the worst.
I know.
You see Hugh Grant.
God, Hugh Grant was sensational again, and it was jaw-dropping in its revelations, wasn't it? The way that the whole, because obviously in this episode, Thorpe is taken to court for accused of attempted murder,
along with his sort of motley crew of helpers.
And it really doesn't look good for him, does it? And all of the witnesses are torn to pieces. And then Ben Whishaw comes in as Norman Scott. And it's just the most fantastic witness, isn't it? And he's his full camp, outrageous, despicable,
he enjoys
brilliant him, and yet he turns the court round, don't they? And they're laughing, and he actually does really, really well.
Yeah.
I love the bit actually when the lawyer comes into Thorpe and says, "You didn't tell me he was so bloody clever."
Yeah, that was great.
Which was great, wasn't it? Because he'd shown off about his first at Cambridge, and he's like the top lawyer and gets all the showbiz people off everything.
That's right. I thought there were some lovely sort of slightly quieter scenes. There was a scene between Hugh Grant and his second wife, just before, where she was kind of not interrogating him, but questioning him about the letters that he'd sent and the stories that were going to hit the press. And it was very tense and very difficult. And one of those conversations, you often, when you hear of these political scandals, you think, what are the conversations between these guys and their wives?
And I think she showcased exactly what we believe is that from a lot of these politicians' wives, where they just swallow it all down. They plaster on a smile.
Well, I disagree.
She loved him.
Yeah, but I disagree. I thought there was one of the tenderest moments there was where she actually
very
said,
tender.
to hear you say that you missed him, she recognised in her, she was being put in a very difficult social situation, but she was recognising the authenticity of what he felt for this guy.
But she was blindly loyal to him, wasn't she? I mean, do you remember in episode 2 where he's in the House of Commons, he's speaking, and she's just a light. I mean, she was, to me, she came across as almost like an obsessed fan with him. She'll have known he was gay. They wouldn't have had a sexual relationship.
I saw that scene as a little bit more tender.
I loved the scene,
thought she was tender with him. I don't think she was just a
agree.
sort of two-dimensional kind of politician's wife. I thought what was nice about that scene was you felt that she understood him better than he understood himself.
Yeah, no.
And I thought that was interesting.
I don't think I put myself across properly there. You're right. It was a beautiful scene. It was tender. It showed the real love that people can have for that within a marriage, even if it isn't a conventional marriage.
Even if you don't agree with it, yeah.
But she was also never going to crack. She was going to blindly, because don't forget, she says in that scene, is this the one and only time? And then before she knows it, they're back in court and there's multiple people and there's all sorts of things. So she was always going to stand by his side.
What did you think of the nickname Bunnies? Would you like to be called
how
Bunnies?
funny was
Imagine
that?
all of that in the
Bunnies
papers.
brought me down. What was the great line Hugh Grant, Jeremy Thorpe said about that?
Oh, what way is it?
we've got it on our notes.
I used a generic noun with an imperative clause. That's how we describe why he used the plural bunnies.
Yeah. And bunnies, in the end, because this letter that was found from Norman Scott, where Jeremy Thorpe had called him bunnies, it actually ended up in Jeremy Thorpe having to resign over it because the country was in.
What about poor old Alex Jennings's character, Peter Bessel? Brought in from California, suffering from emphysema, goes, is willing to sort of spill the beans for a load of money from the Telegraph or the newspaper, whatever it was. Did you feel sorry for him?
I did a bit, because I think, do you remember I said when the review in episode 2 that obviously they were setting up something, because he was starting to think about, why do we just do whatever Jeremy says? Jeremy, he had this blind loyalty, he and the other friend, didn't he? So we'd seen the seed of doubt planted in episode 2, and then he'd got to the point where he had no choice. He was going to go to prison, and he was penniless, living in California.
It was a plea bargain.
So he had no option really. But yeah, I did feel sorry for him, and I felt a little sorry for Jeremy Thorpe that he'd had to watch his friend, turn against him. But then you did see the psychopath in him that was just like, right, finish him.
Yeah. No, well, I saw more of the psychopath in Jeremy Thorpe. I felt for Alex Jennings. Alex Jennings was in a checkmate scenario. He couldn't get out of it. And I felt that he had a friendship for Jeremy Thorpe, and I felt a bit of agony in his eyes. I thought one of the most powerful other scenes in the whole thing was whilst they were in the halls of power at the Old Bailey, when the lawyer came out and was talking to Hugh Grant, Jeremy Thorpe, and was saying, asking about whether he loved this Norman Scott, what were your feelings for Norman Scott? And then just revealed matter-of-factly that he too had sort of batted that way.
Yes.
And then suddenly we had this really curious montage, which for me was an incredibly emotional sequence in which you saw Hugh Grant being beaten up by
Jeremy Thorpe's character.
Being by everyone he had sort of
liaisons
with. And it again reminded me of how driven underground any form of homosexual sort
of activity.
You forget those days. And when he then turned around and said, well, actually, Norman Scott was the nicest the best of the lot.
So he was looking for love, and it was
He was looking for something more tender.
Because up until that point, I thought he was just always looking for sex, actually.
Or power, especially with politicians. Is it just power?
He loved him. I think he did love him. And I think that moment in episode 2 where we saw them cross when Ben Whishaw was on the horse and he was in the car, and we saw that moment where they looked at each other, and they could have almost got together in that moment.
Yeah.
I feel like they could have got back together. If only he'd given him his bloody national insurance card.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what else? Because we put lots of notes down,
I'm just going to ask Kiki to turn off our washing machine. Kiki, could you turn off our washing machine for us as well, please? Thank you. It was an embarrassment of riches, but I think we have to put a shout out for the guy who played the judge, Paul Freeman, who was the villain in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Brilliant. Well, the whole court case was fantastic, wasn't it? Because restrictions were lifted. So again, just as a piece of history, the fact that the minutiae of the sexual activities were gone into in court, and the court were literally, poor Jeremy Thorpe, can you imagine the humiliation? And every day his wife was there and his mother was there, and people howling with laughter. And in Ben Wishaw's, when he's in the box and he talks about in detail the sex how he had to bite into the pillow and all of this sort of stuff, and you think, oh my God, this happened. And this was being reported in the BBC.
You almost don't get 76, wasn't it?
76. Well, you forget that things were still illegal around that time.
But you don't get that sort of explicit reportage now. So it was quite. Imagine. I'm trying to think of what my granddad would have made of all of this. How horrific. He would have, reading the Telegraph, he'd have shook and exploded, I think.
Yeah.
But I thought...
I'm really tempted to look for some old news footage. Apparently, there's a brilliant documentary with the real Norman Scott.
Oh, right.
So if you want to check that out, we're going to watch that. We'll do a little review of it.
Well, if you haven't watched this episode, stay until the very end. It's a little bit like a Marvel film, because there's a wonderful final shot of Norman Scott.
Yeah.
And it's just very sweet. But what I was driving at with the judge was the shameless way in which he steered the jury. And they must
It
have
was incredible.
They must have lifted this from fact.
Real? He said a scurrilous. I mean, he just completely derided Norman Scott. You know, all the evidence was clear, wasn't it, that this attempted murder had been arranged.
It happened.
And the judge, and apparently he was parodied in loads of programs afterwards, the judge, because it was so incredible that he had led the jury literally by the nose. And said, find him not guilty.
Yeah. And then I thought, it's sort of one of the final lines, I thought her part was very small, but she was very good. The woman, Patricia Hodge, who played his mother, and she just whispered to him on the balcony, of course you're ruined.
Yeah. Because at that point, Jeremy Thorpe was waving to the crowds high as a kite that he'd got off, and his mum just, in the way that mums can,
and it's funny,
just cut him to the quick.
And if you go to his Wikipedia entry, it kind of grinds to a halt at this point, at which point his career is ruined. And so his mum was absolutely spot on.
And his wife stayed with him to the end. He became ill, and she nursed him to the end, forever loyal. She really did love him. But I tell you what it made me think about. I thought, in summary, it was a beautifully executed 3-part miniseries. There, you know, some weaknesses within it. I do feel at times it verged on too much of a carry-on, and you mentioned in the last review in episode 2.
Why do so many British dramas end up leaning on that sort of?
It's that seaside postcard sort of.
Yeah, and it didn't need that. I thought it was. You know, Stephen Frears was the director, and a really experienced, one of our best directors. But I have to say, for me, the joy. Ben Whishaw went from being really irritating to I was really impressed with him.
We both really liked him.
Alex Jennings, just my man crush has increased. And Hugh Grant is just...
Well, Hugh Grant is one of my new favourite actors.
Here.
Oh my God, Hugh.
Yeah.
Why have you been hiding it all under the bushel, eh?
Yeah. We love you, Hugh.
We love you, Hugh.
Yeah. I mean, I love you a lot.
We love you loads.
I mean, I want to leave Nadia to meet Hugh.
We need more Hugh Grant in excellent dramas.
I'm gonna go and find him, and I'm gonna ask him a very simple question.
What?
Where's my national insurance card?